Aloha and welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii TV, where we focus on global issues with a local impact. We're excited today as part of the ThinkTech series here to focus on today's show, which is Ehana Kako, meaning Let's Work Together. We have a special guest here in the studio, but first I'm your host, Tim Lussier, Executive Director at Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, a public policy think tank which promotes limited accountable government, free markets, and individual liberty. Here in the studio today joining me is Bob Borek, who is the chair of Hawaii's Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Welcome, Bob. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you.
We broadcast live on the internet at 2 p.m. through 5 p.m. every weekday, so check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com. Our shows are streamed also on ustream.tv and Spreaker.com if you'd like other opportunities to listen in. And if you want the links to all of our live streams or previous broadcasts, join thinktechhawaii.com for all your links right there. Thanks for coming, Bob. But this is an important time in our country. We have Washington, D.C. MS, we have foreign issues, military issues abroad. People are concerned about the future of our country, and you represent an important factor of our military component, reservists and guardists. Can you tell us about you and your important organization?
Sure. Okay. I work with as a volunteer for an organization that was started by the Department of Defense in 1972 that's called the ESGR, or the Employer Committee for Support of the Guard and Reserve.
Okay. And tell us more. How did that get founded, and what are the areas that you work in?
Okay, the committee itself was started back, or authorized by Congress in 1972, at the time when we went to the all-volunteer Army after Vietnam, and they wanted to look at some way other than the draft to work with the military. And they knew that they needed guardsmen and reservists to supplement the active forces, primarily to save a lot of money at that point. But they also realized at the same time that this would be stress on the employers, because if you have young men and women that are working regular daytime jobs in the community and you start pulling them out to deploy them, like we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 10 or 11 years, that you're going to get some pushback from the employers. So what they did is they created an act called USERRA, which is the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Act, which basically says that you can't discriminate against a guardsman or a reservist because he is serving on active duty or in the Guard and Reserve.
And therefore, from those years forward, we've had a more employer-friendly or employee-friendly, if you're a guardsman or a reservist, so that you can do your job when called upon, but also have more opportunities when you come home or when you are home. Can you explain the differences that have changed over time?
Yeah, originally the basic concept of USERRA was to guarantee a service member that if he were activated and called to active duty, that he would be able to get his job back. And that's the basic concept. But like all basic concepts, it becomes more and more complicated as you start working with it over the years. So what we did is we expanded the committee over time. The ESGR itself actually became an agency under the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Reserve Affairs in the Manpower Division. So in the time that I've been with the committee since the early 80s, the number of active duty people back in Washington, D.C. has grown from an office of about 6 to an office of about 30. And here locally, it was purely a volunteer organization when I started. And now we have about 40 volunteers, plus we have 3 full-time contractors who are contracted through various departments of the federal government to give us day-to-day support in carrying out our volunteer duties.
So the expansion of roles and responsibilities have increased in your organization because of the needs of the reservists and the guards have increased?
Yeah, I think because the Guard and Reserve members are being used much more now, there's a lot more room for, I guess we call it friction, between families and the guardsmen and reservists and the employers and the guardsmen and reservists and the services themselves. Because we live in a society that it places a lot of value on commitment, and commitment usually means exclusivity. You focus on one job that you have and that's what you do. But when we take a young man and we ask him to serve as a member of the National Guard or as a reservist in the, whether it's the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Air Force, I'll get them all in here.
There you go.
Or the Coast Guard.
That's right.
There we go. So when we ask him to make that commitment, then that's going to pull some of his time away from his family. It's going to pull time away from his employer, and it's going to make him chafe at the bit a little bit when he's called upon to do a lot of these things. So the purpose of the committee and the ESGR itself is to give guardsmen and reservists kind of a place they can go to that's going to help them and give them backing and selecting how they're going to deal with these different issues, essentially.
Deal with the many interesting and probably many hurdles to deal with being a part-time soldier or full-time soldier, and then having a career to deal with. Your card states that your organization is a Department of Defense agency that seeks to promote a culture in which American employers support and value the military service of their employees. We recognize, your card states, outstanding support, increasing awareness of the law, and resolve conflicts through mediation. Can you tell us more about that purpose?
Yeah, the purpose, it's called the Employers Committee. So the idea was to go out in the community and find a number of employers and get them to spread the word to other employers, to guardsmen and reservists, and even to some extent to the military commanders. So the organization originally had basically three kind of subcommittees, we could call them. So one of the things we did was what's called employer outreach. So we have a number of volunteers that they've been trained in going out and briefing employers on how USERRA works and what their responsibilities are under the law. And then we have another second component that's military outreach. And the people in the military outreach portion of the committee, they go out and they actually visit the military units. They talk to the unit commanders. They do briefings for the reserve component members. And we also are involved in, a lot of you will know the Yellow Ribbon program for families.
Yeah.
We go out and do briefings for the Yellow Ribbon program. And then finally, these are our two proactive elements. And sometimes things just don't work out like they're supposed to. So we have a third arm that is called the Ombudsman. Mm-hmm. And we've got 4 ombudsmen here in town, or ombudsman for those of you that might be closer to Sweden than we are. They've been trained in the finer points of USERRA, and a serviceman that's having a problem with his employer can call an 800 number in Washington, D.C., and he'll be assigned a caseworker basically here. And our caseworkers then will contact the serviceman, contact the employer, and try to mediate resolution of the conflict between the two of them.
What are the most often issues that employees face when, is it because they deploy, they maybe lose benefits or the salary? Is it kind of a mixture of these? What are the biggest hurdles that you folks try to help?
You know, the law specifically says you can't discriminate against a service member, which is pretty broad definition of what you can do. So the kind of issues we run into with service members are, they'll go to the employer and they'll say, I need to drill, or the worst case is I'm going to go on active duty and I'm not going to be back for 9 months. And for a lot of small employers particularly, this can leave them with problems and, you know, finding the skilled people to refill those positions, because you have to remember, someone's deployed with the National Guard for 9 months. When they come back, they get their job back, which means the person that's filling in for them doesn't have a job at that point. So we deal with these type of issues. You know, frankly, USERRA is very specific. It's kind of a non-negotiable thing. The service member, he gets his job back when he comes back. So a lot of this is educating employers so they know how to deal with it. There's a lot of anecdotal things I can tell you about things that have happened here in Hawaii.
Please do.
Some
local examples are always
specifics
nice.
that have come up.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations, the way they assign work hours is by your seniority.
Sure.
But guardsmen and reservists tend to drill on the weekends. So senior people that are accustomed to getting the regular 9 to 5 work assignments sometimes find themselves having to work on Saturday or Sunday because there's not enough staffing, and there's young guardsmen or reservists that's getting Saturday and Sunday off because he needs to drill. Usually the employer, at the highest levels and in the HR department, they understand and they realize. Where we get a little bit more friction is sometimes at the supervisor level and the shift manager level, where they don't understand that there really is a law that says this man or woman can go and drill and do those things. So sometimes the friction's not with the employer per se, it's just with the shift manager or the supervisor at the level that is seeing the service member face to face.
Well, that's incredible. And you obviously have experience here locally in Hawaii, where we have military bases of all types and international connections throughout the world. Mm-hmm. Is Hawaii a unique place for this? Is it different being here as a soldier or a military person? What have you noticed here about Hawaii especially?
The first thing I'd notice here is that what makes it different than the mainland is there's 7 reserve components in our military. There's the Air Guard and the Army Guard. There's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. We've got all 7 of them here. So, most places on the mainland, you would be in a community this size that it may have an Air Force base and an Army base, or it may have a Navy base. And you don't find the wide variety of reservists and guardsmen going in so many different directions. That's one thing. The other thing that I'm really proud of here in Hawaii is that we have a really strong military culture here. There's a chairman like me in every state and Guam, and some of them, they don't have communities that support the Guard and Reserve like we do here. We have our people from, the 100th Battalion, and that we have this tradition of serving in the Guard and Reserve as citizen soldiers that's pretty much permeated our whole community. So that makes it a lot easier, frankly, to work here. Probably the third aspect is that we have a lot of the major commands here. So, by having Pacific Air Forces here and the Navy here, these are major commands that all have flag officers, that these are the people that are setting policy. So the commanders that we deal with on a daily basis, they're usually getting the word directly without a lot of intermediation about their responsibilities for following USERRA and supporting the Guard and Reserve. So it's a great place to be. It's Hawaii.
It is a great place to be. Often cited by unfortunately grunt-old business owners who say it's a hard place to do business, but thankfully there are safeguards, there is support groups like yours so that our soldiers and our heroes will have the resources they need so that they can retain and keep those jobs as necessary. Yep. We're going to be taking a break right now, so thanks for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. Ehana Kako is the program you're watching. We're here with Bob Borek, talking about Army Reservists and National Guards folks and how they can successfully keep and earn their jobs and help our economy grow together. So thanks for watching here. We'll be right back.
Is Howard Dykes of Hawaii News Now. If you want to know how Hawaii it gets its news now and will be getting it in the future, you need to be at Newsmorphosis 3. That's at 11:30 on October 24th at the Plaza Club. See you then. Hi, I'm Steve Petranek.
Good evening. We're delighted that you've come to us today. We are here for ThinkTech Hawaii. Important issues, important people who talk too much. It's all right. You haven't got anything else to do.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our ThinkTech talk shows. If you didn't know it, ThinkTech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on Ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
Hi, thank you for tuning in. My name is Attila Saras, and I'm the host for ThinkTech Fridays. Join us online 24/7, 365 days a year at thinktechhawaii.com. We're talking about things that matter to Hawaii and around the world. My name again is Attila Saras, and I'm the host for ThinkTech Fridays. Mahalo.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard of Kumukuhua Theater, and when I was young I used to love watching Charlie Chan movies on Family Classic TV on Sunday afternoons. Our show at Kumukuhua that runs from August 22nd through September 22nd is called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? It's written by Nancy P. Moss and takes place right here in Chinatown. I really hope you'll come in and watch it. You will love it. It's everything about the movies that you loved and more. Go to kumukuhua.org to get more information and your tickets. We'll see you there.
Aloha and welcome back to the Eheana Kako ThinkTech Hawaii series. We are here with Bob Borek talking about the needs of the military in this global changing world that we live in. Bob, how can reservists and National Guards both be a great component in our society but also be served with the things that they need? We were talking before the break about employers and military reservists and how schedules change, about how obviously lives change with deployments and the needs of the military. Can you tell us in this era really what's been going on? What's new and recent lately that these Guards folks have been dealing with, and then that we in society need to know about to be able to better serve our American heroes?
Yeah, I think probably the area to start is that the way that the United States is using its military has changed a lot since Vietnam. You know, after Vietnam, they knew that they wanted to use the reservists more, and they knew that retaining and training reservists was going to save a lot of money. So they did that, but all the way up until 9/11, they never really used the reserves a lot. And then all of a sudden, we found out that all our reserve and guard units were going to be on these rotations, and they were going to start being used very regularly. So as we all know here in the community, we've got guardsmen and reservists that have been to the Middle East, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times in some cases. So the way the reserve and the guard is being utilized in carrying out America's policy has changed quite a bit. The Office of the Secretary of Defense puts together long-range plans of how they anticipate they're going to use manpower in the future. And starting after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, they're really talking about what we kind of call a new normal. And instead of going back to the pre-9/11 times when the guardsmen and reservists did their training but never really went anywhere, they're really looking at the guard and reserve as being a more integral part of the active duty forces that'll be deployed more often. They're also looking at deploying the military a little bit differently, where in the Cold War we had troops stationed abroad a lot, that were sort of tripwires of national defense. They're looking at pulling back from that. They anticipate not having as many troops forward based as they used to. But what they do look at doing is rotating reserve and guard forces into the active duty mix and sending them forward for either training exercises or I know the Marines have units aboard ship all the time in various parts of the world. And instead of that all being carried out by active duty people, it's going to be more of a partnership between the active duty and the reserve. So what we're going to see for the guardsmen and reservists is not as many deployments as we've had in Afghanistan and Iraq in the last 10 years, but what we're going to see is those deployments continuing, where you'll see your guardsmen and reservists, even though there's no conflict, they'll be called up for 9 months. We'll see the Guard and Reserve used more in domestic deployment to help domestically, and more just standardized rotational deployments overseas, where a Guard unit will know that part of their job is to go and support a specific unit in Germany or Japan or somewhere on a regular basis. So I think that's quite a change in the way we're utilizing the military in the past.
So the new normal is very tough on soldiers and their families. I'm sure it sounds like increased rotations. Obviously, it puts a definite added strain not only on their families and the soldiers themselves, but on the employers who have to deal with the employee leaving and hopefully returning. Is this obviously you don't direct where the folks go and you just support it? So is this something that your organization is having to deal with because of the new more increased employments? There's more services needed. The soldiers need more help. They need more assistance. Is that?
Yeah, the whole approach to supporting guardsmen and reservists has changed. I'm sure there's many members of the audience who were in the Guard and Reserve 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, if we go back to Vietnam, going to the Guard or Reserve for a lot of people was just a way to avoid going on active duty to be deployed. There was a period before that when they used to kind of joke about, you would just go to your drill meeting and, play cards and drink beer and then come home afterwards. So those days are long gone. Now the reservists and the guardsmen are really an integrated part of the active force, and they're being brought in all the time. So let's take that change and bring it into the future. And the way the Department of Defense is looking at the utilization of the Guard and Reserve now is these continuous rotations. So what we speak of when we talk about guardsmen and reservists now is trying to develop what we call continuity of service. Because now when we look at a trained guardsman or reservist, and we look forward to him maintaining hopefully a 20-year or longer career with the military, he'll be called up for a period of active duty probably for 9 to 12 months every 5 or 6 years. So that means that over your career you'd probably see maybe 4 deployments of 9 months or more. So what we're doing is the Yellow Ribbon program is being reorganized through the ESGR. The Department of Defense is trying to consolidate the way the assets are used to save money, avoid duplication. And going back to this concept of continuity of service, we spend a lot of money training a guardsmen and reservists. We've got guardsmen and reservists that are everything from infantrymen to truck mechanics to helicopter and transport pilots. They can drive submarines, they can run nuclear motors on submarines. I mean, all these skills that cost hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more to teach people. So the government invests all this money in training. We want to retain those people. And as I mentioned earlier, you get this conflict between the family, the demands of the Guard and Reserve, and the employer that wants a good trained person there all the time. So the concept of continuity of service then is that through the ESGR, the Yellow Ribbon program, we now have an employment initiative where we actually actively help guardsmen and reservists find jobs if their job isn't here when they come back, or maybe they didn't have a job when they were called up. So we try to find them a job. We work with their families so that I tend to think of it as going like this through your career as you do these deployments, but there's going to be pre-deployment counseling for the service member and his family and notifications to the employer. Then he's going to do his 9 to 12 months of service, active duty, and then he's going to have to be reintegrated into the community. So we're developing for the reserve and guard members, all the services and things that they need to be able to be a productive member of the community and to get all this friction out of the way. So we want to make sure they have jobs, they have the counseling that they need when they come back, make sure their wives and families are supported when they're gone.
And that's really getting down to the core of it at the basic human level is supporting their basic human needs, right? If they're putting their life on the line, if they're putting their mental and professional career towards a purpose, which is serving our country's needs in its military aspects or National Guard aspects, this is the least we can do, right? The least we can do is the best practices of counseling, the best practices of job placement or job assistance because they've been taken away from that location and coming back. And obviously the unemployment rate for veterans, I understand, is too high. Obviously, it's something that we need to work on continually and always improve to decrease it so that our heroes, are hired, which is a program that I think you're involved in. Is it called Hire Heroes Hawaii?
Hawaii Hires Heroes.
Hawaii Hires Heroes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is our local program that we have here. And I have a vice chairman, that would be Ann Greenlee. And Ann Greenlee is also the DOL Vets representative over at the Federal Department of Labor. And she worked with the community and with the Adjutant General, General Wong, and the services to develop what we call H3, or Hawaii Hires Heroes, which is the program we use to contact employers and try to bring them into a regular communications network where we communicate with them not only about their responsibilities as employers of guardsmen and reservists, but also ways they can actively help guardsmen and reservists. One of the things we've focused on recently is helping reservists and guardsmen get jobs. So we have about 70 companies that have signed up for Hawaii Hires Heroes, and they post jobs. At the federal level, we have another program, the H2 program, or H2H, which consists of a database where employers can go into the database and they can list jobs. Guardsmen and reservists can go into the database and they can describe the type of job they're looking for. They can describe their skill set, and the computer automatically matches up jobs with people and notifies them. You can use it on your smartphone, and you log in, and if there's a match, it'll send you a notice and actually tell you you should go contact this employer. Now, we take it a step further. It's not just an online service. But we have a very capable individual here, Ed Cruikshank, who used to be in the mayor's office and worked as the mayor's advisor for Veterans Affairs, Mayor Carlisle, that is. But he's active with us now, and what he's done is he's actually gone and worked with the Adjutant General, General Wong, and we get physical lists of jobs that are available from the H3 members. And Ed will actually go out to the drilling reservists on the weekends, and with the help of General Wong and his commanders, he'll go down to the unit level and talk to the first sergeants and the sergeant majors and actually deliver lists of jobs and things for the service members.
Wow, that's incredible, and that's the kind of support that we need, and that's the kind of support your organization helps promote.
Well, the organization's made up of volunteers from the community.
Nice.
And we have these concepts and ideas and laws that try to enforce them and make them work. But what really makes our community work is caring individuals that'll take their own time to go out and get involved in these issues and spend time either talking to guardsmen and reservists, talking to employers, or resolving differences between them.
And how can people get involved? Why don't you go ahead and tell the viewers ways that people can get involved before we take a break?
Yeah, I would say the easiest way to do that is just Google ESGR. It'll take you to our national site, and on the national site it has, on the menu bar, it'll say volunteers. Click on volunteers. If you're a service member, click on service member. If you're an employer, click on employer, and what it'll do is it'll lead you to the section of the site that gives you the information that's appropriate to what you're looking for at that time.
Great. We're here at ThinkTech Hawaii. This is the E Hanakako, sponsored by Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. I'm Tim Lussier, the Executive Director. Thank you for watching so far. We're going to take a break and then talk about some actually more personal stories. I'm going to mention a special friend I have who many of you may know, and a great story. So we'll be back right after this short break to talk more about guardsmen. Thank you.
I'm Bill Spencer, President of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association. We do monthly luncheon programs with ThinkTech about things that matter to Hawaii entrepreneurs, investors, and business service providers. So join us on the fourth Thursday of every month at the Plaza Club. For information about upcoming events or to join our mailing list, visit hvca.org. See you there.
Welcome back to Ehanakako. Let's Work Together is the title of this program. We're here, Grassroots Institute Hawaii is a sponsor here. I'm Tim Lussier. Thanks for joining us. We're here with Bob Borek with the employer support of the Guard and Reserve. He's the chair here in Hawaii, and we're just talking about the important issues of today. That's what we do here at ThinkTech Hawaii. A little personal story. I was at Hawaii Pacific University. That's why I came out to Hawaii, originally from Oregon. And I've heard about this man in the city council. And while Grassroots Institute Hawaii and ThinkTech Hawaii aren't political, we can't endorse candidates or give money. I noticed there's a man named Charles DeJoux who's making a racket around some issues that he was working on. I eventually got to know him and support him a little bit on his congressional campaign. And it was an honor to really serve a gentleman like that in any way, because I saw he was a hero to me in the civic arena, fighting for values that he believed in. But he was also a JAG officer in the Army Reserves. And so when he won a seat in Congress, he ended up losing it in a re-election. And after he lost his re-election, he was deployed to Afghanistan. And I remember one of the votes he took in Congress was to vote to reauthorize the war in Afghanistan. So I saw somebody that I personally believed in, really close, inspiration and mentor, not only run for office because he believed in something, got into office, actually had to make that vote to reauthorize something he believed in, something he thought was important, lose his re-election, and then actually be deployed to Afghanistan after as a private citizen. And that's really the story, it seems like, of many of these folks, right? The common man, the person that is, to their day to day, their average person, and then eventually American hero when they're sent abroad to serve. Is that the story of the average Army reservist and guardsman?
Yeah, I think so. Not just guardsmen and reservists, but the active duty people too.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think what we really need to focus on is maybe less on national policy and laws and things like that, and really talk about the functioning of our community. Charles is an excellent example of somebody that's done that. Tulsi Gabbard
absolutely
has done the same thing. And I have to give a lot of credit to Mark Takai. A lot of the benefits that guardsmen and reservists have in the state of Hawaii is due to efforts on the part of Mark Takai.
Many great leaders who not only serve civically, but also serve wearing the uniform.
Exactly.
Many examples. And most of them deal with the same issues that we have, day to day in our personal lives, right? They're probably married, or maybe they have kids. I mean, children. Do you have a typical example of who these people are that we're talking about? I mean, are they mainly from Hawaii that are stationed here that you're serving? Are they average middle age? Can you give us some examples of kind of some people we may run into the grocery store but not realize that they're a reservist?
It's funny you mention that. I want to say George Washington because he's sort of the epitome of what historically in the country we've called the citizen soldier, because the idea is we're a free democracy, and the whole idea of the militia and the Minutemen and all these things was that we had a ready reserve of people that we could call upon to defend the country when we needed them. So, and if you go through the community, you're going to find these people all through the community. So I'd encourage you in the course of conversation, when you're talking to somebody, ask them if they've served. And a lot of times, because I do it, and I'll find the CEO of a major company somewhere, and he's never mentioned it, but he'd say, oh yeah, I was a sergeant, in the infantry in Vietnam, or I was a lieutenant in the first Gulf War. And they're just everywhere throughout our culture here. Again, we have to go back to the Second World War. We've got the people, that served.
The greatest generation.
Yeah, the greatest generation that served and supported our country, came back and rebuilt the greatest country. So they're everywhere.
So the Guard and National Guard and Reserves are just like our average military, or the rest of the military who are full-time enlisted.
Yeah,
average, everyday kind of person, and often, as they call them, the weekend warriors, right? If
Yeah,
they're the
well,
guard.
we're probably not allowed to say weekend warrior. It's not politically correct
Okay,
anymore.
okay.
No, I don't. And I say that partly in jest because
There's a discussion
long
in
ago
the
when
community.
I was a reservist back in the late 70s and early 80s when I was actively in the Marine Corps Reserve, and we used to have these little bumper stickers that would kind of have obnoxious phrases on them, like "I do more in a weekend than you do all week" or something like that, or "you do in a month." And there was some friction between the active duty side and the guardsmen and the reservists. And the guardsmen and reservists sometimes are kind of treated as, the
Second
ill-mannered
tier
stepchildren. So, but all of that has changed.
Good.
It's a fully operational, integrated force now where you really can't tell when you look at them in uniform which ones are which. And we've been talking a lot about the guardsmen and reservists
Sure.
that support this, but there's an enormous amount of support that comes from people that don't have any military service at all. I mentioned the ombudsman in our committee many times that are resolving issues between employers and guardsmen. And here in Hawaii, J.N. Musto, who many of you may know as the executive director of the University of Hawaii Professional Assembly, he's our lead ombudsman, and he has 3 other ombudsmen that work for him here, or work with him, or volunteer with him here in town. I hate to use the word work, but it is work, but it's all volunteer, unpaid.
Valuable volunteer
Yeah.
work.
But he's a gentleman that did not serve in the Guard or Reserve,
Okay.
but his heart is in this. He'll go out and work hour after hour to resolve issues for people. And he kind of follows the phrase. One of our taglines that we use in ESGR is, "We all serve." And that's really true. Whether you've been in the service or not, the overall objective is the defense of our country.
And the support of its soldiers.
Correct.
Full-time,
Yep.
guard, reserve, all of them.
Exactly.
Great. So employers can get more information. You have been continuing to mention, I've seen some nice posters that you guys have. How can people get to know you and learn more? What are the best ways that employers can educate themselves?
Okay, I'd say the single best way, I should have mentioned this earlier, is you want to go to www.esgr.mil and then just look at the website there, and it's self-explanatory. It'll lead you to information, whether you're an employer, whether you're interested in volunteering, or whether you're a service member that needs help. Just esgr.mil, and it's got everything you could want.
Including a statement of support. Is that an employer's a way that they can help advocate for the military? Is that a way that they can step up and say, we're a military-friendly organization?
Yeah, we have one of my predecessors referred to the ESGR as he used to call it a self-licking ice cream cone, because we have this way of contacting more employers through the service members. So service members can nominate their employer for an award that is called My Boss is a Pro. And the award is sent out from Washington, D.C., and then we send a volunteer out, and the volunteer will arrange for the service member and the employer to be together and make a public presentation of the award. We do these every week practically. We do hundreds of them every year, where our volunteers go out with the service member to issue these awards. Now, we have a Pro Patria Award, because some employers do more than others. And we're very fortunate here in Hawaii. We've had 2 employers here in Hawaii that have won the National Freedom Award. And every year the Department of Defense gives 15 National Freedom Awards. 5 are given to government agencies, 5 to large employers, and 5 to small employers. And here in Hawaii, we've won in the small employer category. The winner a few years ago was Coastal Windows. And some of you may know Bob Borek at Coastal Windows. He's a very enthusiastic supporter of the ESGR. But when his reservist was deployed, his company actively went out and worked with the reservist family They made sure they contacted the reservists regularly while he was deployed. And he really went above and beyond the requirements of the law in terms of taking care of his employee, taking care of the employee's family, and then making sure it was a smooth transition for him when they came back.
A gentleman that clearly appreciates his employees and clearly appreciates his community. What a great man to help his soldiers serve and help us continue to get Windows, apparently. This is the A Hanakako TV series. We're live here streaming on the internet. You are here tuned into A Hanakako Let's Work Together hour. We're going to take a real quick break right now, and when we'll come back, we'll talk about an interesting anecdote about if you've flown here in Hawaii, you may have actually been interacting with a reservist or guardsman or someone that's served. We'll talk more about that in a second when we come back.
I'm Bill Spencer, President of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association. We do monthly luncheon programs with ThinkTech about things that matter to Hawaii entrepreneurs, investors, and business service providers. So join us on the fourth Thursday of every month at the Plaza Club. For information about upcoming events or to join our mailing list, visit hvca.org. See you there.
We're back here at the A Hanakako Let's Work Together video series here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you for joining us live online or re-watched. If you've flown recently in a Hawaiian Airlines plane, your pilot may have been somebody that served their military. A great example of some way that our military have served their country and then also served in a distinguished career afterwards. Is that a good example of one of the great ways that our military has served us?
I'd say that's a very good example. Yeah.
Good.
Plus, if you've ridden on a bus, there's a good chance the mechanic that worked on the bus or drives the bus was a reservist or is a reservist.
Highly trained
or a
on those
guardsman.
machines and or tanks.
Exactly.
If they did that in their previous career.
So-
Now, Bob, you were mentioning Hawaii's businesses ranked and won a few awards. Tell us about that.
That's true. After Coastal Windows won the National Freedom Award in the small business sector, we also won in the government sector. The state of Hawaii was a winner of the Freedom Award. And again, I'd have to say largely through the efforts of Mark Takai. And because the state of Hawaii, one of the benefits that guardsmen and reservists have here is there's a tuition waiver program. There were some other benefits they had with automobile licensing and things like that in the past that were largely brought about through the efforts of people here in Hawaii. And I can't let this all go without talking about the wonderful support we've gotten from Governor Abercrombie also. Last month, Hawaii on the visitor industry side was, we hosted the National Guard Association of the United States, had their national convention here at the convention center. Governor Abercrombie was the keynote speaker, and I had the privilege of being able to attend that meeting with him. I'd also like to say that occasionally ESGR, we hold employer breakfasts, and the governor's been so supportive of the Guard and Reserve that he's attended a couple of those breakfasts and spoken at those breakfasts for us. So we continue to get very good support from the governor of the state of Hawaii and all the departments therein.
And a common maybe misunderstanding, the Guard is reporting to the governor versus the Army Reserves is a segment of the U.S. Army. Can you explain that real quick for our viewers?
Yeah, just real quick. Each of the major components of the National Armed Forces has a reserve component. So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard all have a reserve component. The National Guard's a little bit different because the National Guard it works two missions. The National Guard does belong to the governor, and the governor can deploy the National Guard for civil defense missions and things like that. But at the same time, a lot of the funding for that comes from the federal government. So the National Guard really can kind of go, they can be sent on a mission at the federal level, or they can be used on a mission by the governor.
And either way, you're there to help them make sure.
Yes, either way, the ESGR and volunteers in the ESGR are there to help make sure that guardsmen and reservists get jobs when they come back from deployment, that they're not discriminated against. And if they don't have a job, we're going to help them find a job.
Great. Well, is there anything else that we needed to know about? I mean, I see these interesting panels you have right here. Are the Guard currently deployed throughout the world? I mean, we have bases all over. Is it a is that something that changes the way that their deployments, the length or the duration, based on where they are deployed throughout the world?
Yeah, you know, here in Hawaii, what catches the news is when one of the major units deploys to Afghanistan. But we have guardsmen and reservists all over the world, literally. We have guardsmen and reservists that will go to Europe, they go to Africa, they go to South America, they go to Asia, and I've been out to Korea. We've got we've got Army reservists that are connected to commands here, that are reservists, that are actually doing their reserve duty in Korea or in Japan. We're connected with units in American Samoa, and we've sent volunteers down to American Samoa. So all these places, when there's an exercise, remember, we've got reservists and guardsmen that have very specific skills. You might have people that are in intelligence, radio communications, satellite communications, or that have a specific skill. They aren't necessarily deployed as a unit. They might be sent off one or two at a time to go somewhere to be part of a specific training exercise. There might be a gap in a regular active duty billet that isn't being filled because they don't have enough people to fill it. They'll call up a guardsman or reservist, activate him, send him to Europe, send him to South America, send him to Africa to fill in for a specific period of time.
Wow. And can you go through, I don't want to demand that you know the history of our Guard deployments, but the recent ones, I mean, what specifically would people remember about our Guard deployments, or who we have on bases here locally? Yeah,
I think, as I mentioned, usually you're going to remember what you see in the paper. Mm-hmm. We know we've sent people to Iraq. We know we've sent people to Afghanistan, but we have also, sent people to Europe and other places, people to the mainland. Frankly, a lot of them just do their active duty right up here at Camp Smith. Mm-hmm. So ask your friends and neighbors. You've got guardsmen and reservists in your neighborhood that either are serving now or have served in the past. There's about 10,000 guardsmen and reservists here in Hawaii. That's about 1% of the population that are actually serving right now. When you go back and look at all the ones that have served and are working in the community, there's thousands and thousands more. So ask your friends and neighbors what their experience has been, whether it was positive or not. And if you're really interested, go log in to esgr.mil. We can use additional volunteers.
Nice. And just wanted to thank you. This has been fascinating. We mentioned earlier about how your generation had the choice of joining, and one of the options apparently was the lighter option. And, my generation wasn't forced with a draft. So, I think it's important for these kind of interviews to be shared with folks like me of my age, so that we can appreciate the service that our volunteer military has and the sacrifices that they make. So I think this is an extremely important topic, and I'm honored to have you here. This has been a very good discussion, and so.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, with just a few more minutes just to wrap up, but I'm just trying to think, since we're talking about personal examples, now I'm trying to think of going over and who I know currently. I have a friend, Dylan in Hilo. He's currently with the Army Reserve. I saw he did a couple stints on the mainland, saw some photos of some things that they were building. It looked like quite the adventure, he said, in somewhere in the Midwest. He wasn't enjoying the heat. It wasn't a good time of year, I guess, to be there, especially to leave Hilo. Hilo boy. But, being on Oahu here in Honolulu, it's an amazing place. There are diverse cultures and people from all around the world. Me attending Hawaii Pacific University and serving as student body president, it was both an honor and a privilege to know so many folks who were, serving for many many different reasons, and a lot of them found themselves, many of them happy in Hawaii, being deployed here, but many of them obviously pre-deployment to Afghanistan. I've had a couple of friends even from Oregon that I knew that joined the Army and ended up at Schofield, and then we obviously served some deployments there. So it's been a very good experience for me as a young person to be able to experience the true value of many of these people serving. So it's an honor to know you, and
thank you
appreciate all
very
you've
much.
done. And I'm glad the viewers could hear more about what you do, and so we can help, all of those that serve. They potentially give all, their entire life, and obviously they sacrifice their lives while they're away from home.
That's true.
And doing so much. So here at Ehanakako, Hawaii, ThinkTech Hawaii, we are here happy to discuss today's issues, the important issues of today. I'm Tim Lussier, Executive Director of Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, a nonprofit public policy institute promoting limited government, free markets, and individual liberty. And today I'm honored to have Bob Borek here, Chair of the Employer Support of the Guard Reserve here in Hawaii. So thank you so much, Bob.
Thank
it's been
you,
a
Tim.
pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
And keep serving.
Thank
you.
I will. Thank you.